From the moment nicotine enters your body, a transformation begins. Quick, quiet, and incredibly efficient. Within 10 seconds of inhalation, this compound has already crossed from your lungs into your bloodstream and arrived at the brain, unlocking receptors with a kind of chemical precision that seems less like coincidence and more like design. But this design comes with a cost. To the brain, nicotine is not just another molecule. It's a key that fits into a lock meant for something else entirely, and by turning it, the balance shifts. The reward system activates. Dopamine is released in sudden pulses. Your brain begins to rewrite what feels good, what feels necessary, and eventually, what feels normal. Nicotine doesn't shout its arrival, it whispers. Unlike other drugs that intoxicate or overwhelm, nicotine slips into your biology almost unnoticed. There is no stumbling, no slurring, no blackout to warn you of its power. Instead, there's a calm, a sharpening of attention, a faint clarity that feels productive, focused, manageable. But beneath that calm, a chemical negotiation has begun. Your brain is now adapting to a new baseline, one that includes nicotine. And with every puff, every patch, every pouch, that baseline shifts further. One of the reasons nicotine is so potent is because it mimics acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter involved in learning, memory, and attention. The receptors that normally respond to acetylcholine begin to recognize nicotine as a substitute. They open wide for it. They adapt around it. Over time, they expect it. And so the brain, in its plastic brilliance, begins building more receptors to accommodate this new presence. The more nicotine you use, the more receptors are created. The more receptors exist, the more nicotine is needed to fill them. And thus, a feedback loop begins. Not because of a flaw in willpower, but because the brain is doing what it's designed to do: adjust to its environment. The stimulation of these receptors leads to a cascade of biochemical effects. Dopamine floods certain pathways, reinforcing the behavior and encouraging repetition. This is not pleasure in the simple sense. It's a deep biological imprint that says, do that again. Each repetition strengthens the imprint. Each session trains the brain. The reward becomes intertwined with identity. Nicotine doesn't just feel good, it begins to feel essential. The feeling that nicotine provides is difficult to describe unless you felt it. It is not the euphoria of opiates or the disorientation of alcohol. It is subtler, a kind of cognitive boost paired with a calming undertone. You feel awake, slightly elevated, but not overwhelmed. This dual action, stimulation paired with relaxation, is rare. It's what gives nicotine its edge. It smooths stress while sharpening the mind, at least temporarily. But the body always balances stimulation with fatigue. And the longer nicotine is used, the more its stimulation wears thin, and the fatigue begins to show. At first, the effects seem like gifts. The ability to concentrate longer, to relax more easily, to find comfort in routine. But these benefits are short-lived and conditional. The focus comes with a cost. The relaxation has a shelf life. Over time, the original reasons for using nicotine are replaced with a different motivation: avoiding the discomfort that arises when it's gone. The body adjusts, and what once felt like enhancement becomes maintenance. Withdrawal is not dramatic at first. It begins as restlessness, irritability, a feeling that something is slightly off. The world feels sharper in a bad way. Noise is louder, tempers shorter. Concentration slips, mood darkens. These sensations build over hours, sometimes days, depending on usage. The brain, now accustomed to the presence of nicotine, begins to protest its absence. And so, the cycle resumes. A puff, a patch, a pouch. Relief. The discomfort fades. Balance returns. But the balance is artificial, maintained only by repeating the behavior that caused the imbalance in the first place. What makes nicotine difficult to quit is not just the intensity of withdrawal, but its persistence. The cravings are not constant, but they are relentless. They arrive in waves, unpredictable, sometimes triggered by environment, emotion, or simply by habit. A morning coffee, a stressful phone call, a quiet moment alone. These moments become associated with nicotine, and the brain, seeking reward, lights up with anticipation. Even after weeks or months without nicotine, those associations remain like echoes. The substance may be gone, but the pattern survives. Unlike some other substances, nicotine rarely leads to immediate physical collapse. It does not shut down organs or overwhelm the senses in a single sitting. Its damage is incremental, spread across time and systems. But that damage is real. The cardiovascular system bears a heavy burden. Nicotine raises heart rate and blood pressure, narrowing blood vessels and making the heart work harder to push blood through tighter channels. Over time, this stress contributes to hypertension, hardening of the arteries, and increased risk of heart attack and stroke. The lungs suffer too, though the primary villain in cigarette smoke is not nicotine itself, but the thousands of chemicals it travels with. Tar, carbon monoxide, formaldehyde, arsenic, and countless others. These substances coat the lining of the respiratory system, paralyze the tiny hairs that sweep away debris, and inflame delicate tissues. The result is chronic coughing, shortness of breath, and eventually diseases like chronic bronchitis and emphysema. In these conditions, air gets trapped in the lungs, oxygen exchange becomes impaired, and simple tasks like walking upstairs become exhausting. For those who use smokeless tobacco or vaping products, the risks take different forms. The lungs may be less involved, but the rest of the body is not spared. Vaping exposes users to volatile organic compounds, flavoring agents, and heavy metals, all of which have unclear long-term effects. Some ingredients, when heated and inhaled, break down into toxins that damage cells and suppress immune function. The illusion of safety with e-cigarettes is based more on marketing than science. While they may be less harmful than cigarettes in some ways, less harmful does not mean safe. The gastrointestinal system also feels the impact. Nicotine slows the movement of food through the digestive tract, leading to constipation in some and nausea in others. Appetite often decreases, and body weight may drop, not because of health, but because of metabolic disruption. In some individuals, the discomfort caused by eating while using nicotine becomes a deterrent to meals, creating a pattern of undernourishment masked as self-control. The skin, too, reflects nicotine's influence. Blood flow to the surface is reduced, depriving cells of oxygen and nutrients. Wound healing slows, wrinkles deepen. A sallow, prematurely aged appearance develops. The capillaries that feed the skin lose elasticity, and over time, complexion fades. These changes are not superficial. They are signs of slowed regeneration, signs of a system constantly compensating for imbalance. Perhaps most profoundly, nicotine affects emotional regulation. At first, it may seem like a balm for anxiety or low mood, but with repeated use, the brain's ability to regulate emotion without nicotine diminishes. You begin to need it to feel calm, to feel stable. This dependence is not a character flaw. It's a rewiring of the neural circuits that process reward and stress. And as the baseline shifts, so does your emotional range. The highs flatten, the lows deepen. You start feeling less like yourself without knowing exactly when that shift occurred. Sleep is another casualty. While nicotine may seem to promote alertness during the day, it often interferes with the body's natural sleep cycles at night. It shortens the time spent in deep sleep, increases wakefulness after falling asleep, and leads to more fragmented rest. You may fall asleep quickly, but the rest is shallow. Over time, this cumulative sleep deficit impairs memory, weakens the immune system, and heightens emotional reactivity. The fatigue becomes background noise, a constant hum of exhaustion that never quite goes away. Over the years, the consequences add up. What begins as a choice slowly becomes a necessity. What felt like control gives way to compulsion, and the body, so resilient, begins to strain under the weight of constant compensation. Systems that once worked in harmony begin to falter. The heart tires, the lungs resist, the brain pleads for balance, and through it all, the grip of nicotine remains firm. Yet even with all this, nicotine's cultural image is conflicted. It has long been associated with rebellion, sophistication, even productivity. It's been framed as a companion to stress, a break from monotony, a reward after effort. Marketing has wrapped it in glamour. History has enshrined it in habit. From soldiers in foxholes to writers at their desks, nicotine has been portrayed as a silent ally. But the chemistry tells a different story. It is not an ally, it is an imposter, one that offers comfort, then quietly demands it, one that mimics balance, then undermines it. And perhaps the most important truth is this: nicotine doesn't work in isolation. It rides alongside context, the stress of a job, the pressure of performance, the pull of anxiety. It wraps itself around these moments and pretends to solve them. But what it really does is delay their resolution. The feelings return, the stress renews, and once again, the cycle begins. This is why quitting is so hard. Not just because of the chemical dependence, but because of the emotional and behavioral role nicotine has come to play. It becomes part of the rhythm of life, a ritual, a punctuation mark to the day. And removing it feels not only like losing a substance, but like losing a part of yourself. But the truth is, that part was never you. It was a pattern, a learned response. And what is learned can be unlearned. What has been wired can be rewired. Stopping nicotine use does not mean losing comfort or calm or control. It means reclaiming those things on your own terms. It means teaching your brain to function as it once did, before the receptors multiplied and the circuits rewired. And while that process is difficult, it is not impossible. In fact, it is one of the most powerful transformations a person can choose. What happens after you quit nicotine is not a single event, but a sequence of changes unfolding across time and systems, each one pulling back a layer of the dependence, one chemical shift at a time. In the beginning, there is discomfort, sometimes mild, sometimes severe, but always present. This discomfort is not only physical, it is emotional, it is behavioral, it is chemical. It is the brain looking for something that has gone missing and not yet understanding why. And yet, in that confusion, something powerful begins. The reversal. Within the first few hours of quitting, the levels of nicotine in the bloodstream begin to drop. As that concentration diminishes, the receptors in the brain, still primed for stimulation, fire less frequently. The dopamine circuits, once lit up by each dose, grow dimmer. The feelings that follow can be unsettling. Irritability rises, restlessness creeps in, sleep feels further away, concentration becomes difficult, cravings swell. This is not a failure of strength. It is the normal response of a brain adjusting to the absence of something it once relied on. At the 24-hour mark, the body has already eliminated most of the nicotine, but the receptors it upregulated still remain. The brain continues to search for the stimulus it expects, and when it doesn't arrive, it protests. This protest can take many forms: short temper, frustration, sadness, a sense of unease that cannot be named. But behind the scenes, healing has already begun. Carbon monoxide levels in the blood drop, allowing oxygen to return to normal. The heart begins to relax. Blood pressure starts to stabilize. The lining of the lungs begins to regenerate. Over the next several days, the process accelerates. Cilia, tiny hair-like structures in the lungs that sweep away mucus and debris, begin to function more efficiently. Breathing may temporarily feel worse as the lungs clear themselves out, but this is a sign of progress, not decline. Taste and smell sharpen. Food becomes more flavorful, scents more vivid. These small returns are often the first signs that the body is waking up, reasserting its original rhythm. As the first week passes, the cravings reach their peak. They arrive like waves, sudden, strong, and often tied to familiar routines. Morning coffee, driving, breaks at work. Each of these moments was once paired with nicotine. Now, they arrive raw. The challenge is not to erase the craving, but to let it rise and fall without acting on it. With each wave that passes unmet, the brain learns something new: that survival is possible, that calm can return, that the body does not need nicotine to function. And this learning, though invisible, is the foundation of recovery. In the second and third weeks, the nervous system continues to recalibrate. The number of receptors in the brain begins to decline as the demand for nicotine fades. Cravings, while still present, become less intense and less frequent. Energy starts to return in bursts. Sleep stabilizes. Moods begin to level out. There are good days and hard days, often back to back, but each one is a step further from dependence. The fog that once clouded thinking begins to lift. Memory improves. The capacity to focus strengthens. The brain is no longer reacting to the absence of nicotine. It is beginning to remember how to operate without it. One of the most surprising changes is emotional. With nicotine gone, emotions feel sharper. Joy is brighter. Frustration more acute. Sadness deeper. This intensity can be jarring. Nicotine dulled many of these edges. Without it, you feel everything more vividly. But with that clarity comes presence. Moments become fuller. Experiences more complete. The emotional dampening fades, and in its place is a more authentic sense of self. Physical changes continue. Blood circulation improves. Skin begins to look healthier. Fingertips and toes, once slightly cool from reduced blood flow, warm. The digestive system, previously slowed by nicotine, resumes normal rhythm. Appetite normalizes. Some gain weight, others don't. But what matters is that the body is now making decisions based on hunger and fullness, not chemical interference. At the 1-month mark, confidence builds. There is a growing sense of possibility. The dependence, once so strong, now seems beatable. New routines take shape. Walks instead of smoke breaks. Tea instead of patches. Deep breaths instead of deep drags. Each replacement is a small victory. Not just a distraction, but a repatterning of behavior. The brain begins to associate new actions with comfort. With time, those associations become stronger than the old ones. Still, there are setbacks. Triggers can reappear without warning. A stressful conversation, an old memory, a place that once invited smoking. In these moments, the craving returns, not just for nicotine, but for what nicotine represented: escape, control, routine, reward. But in that moment of recognition is a choice: to repeat the cycle or to step out of it. Every time you choose not to return to it, the craving loses power. It fades, it lets go. 3 months in, the improvements are undeniable. Lung function increases by a measurable percentage. Exercise becomes easier. Coughing reduces. Sleep becomes deeper. The complexion brightens. The voice, once hoarse, clears. The body feels less burdened. The brain less occupied. Time begins to open up. There are hours in the day that were once devoted to use, now available for other things. Reading, talking, creating, simply being. These reclaimed hours are more than free time. They are freedom itself. At 6 months, the immune system is stronger. The likelihood of respiratory infections drops. Energy stabilizes. The internal dialogue about nicotine grows quieter. Fewer moments are shaped by craving. The fear of relapse softens. The distance between use and abstinence feels wider, more permanent. And yet, the memory of nicotine remains. Less like a threat, more like a shadow. Present, but no longer controlling. By the 1-year mark, the transformation is not only physical, it is personal. A new identity begins to take hold. One not built on avoidance or resistance, but on resilience. You are not merely someone who has quit nicotine. You are someone who has reclaimed ownership over your choices. The brain's reward system, once hijacked, now operates under new guidance. Pleasure comes from different places. Relationships feel different. Moments feel longer. The nervous system, once constantly stimulated, now rests in balance. But perhaps the most powerful change is this: your mind no longer defines relief by the presence of a chemical. Relief comes from quiet, from rest, from knowing that your body is no longer managing a substance it never needed in the first place. The receptors have adjusted, the cells have rebuilt. The cravings, once urgent, now pass without notice. In place of dependence is agency. In place of compulsion is clarity. And yet, even here, caution is necessary. Because the patterns that led to nicotine use are often still present. The stress, the boredom, the emotional swings. Nicotine was not the origin of these feelings. It was the reaction to them. And if not addressed, they may find new outlets: food, work, screens, substance. This is why quitting nicotine is not just about removal. It's about reflection. It's about understanding what needs were being met and finding healthier ways to meet them. Recovery, in this light, is not an ending. It's an invitation to rebuild routines, to explore new tools, to deepen emotional literacy. It's an opportunity to ask, without judgment, what was I using nicotine for? What did it provide? And how else can I meet those needs? Some people find this clarity on their own. Others need support through therapy, group connection, or coaching. There is no one path, only forward motion. What matters is honesty about the difficulty, about the progress, about the reasons that kept you returning to nicotine, and the reasons you choose not to now. This honesty is what grounds the process. It prevents substitution with another dependency. It keeps you connected to the deeper transformation happening underneath the surface. Because quitting nicotine is not only a physical act, it is a psychological reset. a chance to meet discomfort without numbing it, to face emotion without running from it, to discover who you are when the haze lifts. There will be moments of temptation, sometimes years after quitting. A smell, a memory, a voice inside that wonders, just once. In these moments, the body may not react, but the mind still might. The key is not to deny the temptation, but to name it, to see it clearly, to remember the cost, and then to choose again. Each time, the choice becomes easier, the craving less convincing, the memory more distant. And with enough time, the thought of nicotine becomes just that, a thought, not a desire, not a command, just a whisper in a louder, more vibrant life. A life that is fuller, calmer, clearer, not because of what's been removed, but because of what's been revealed. You begin to notice things, the morning air, the way your body feels in motion, the subtle shifts in your energy. These were always there, but obscured. Now they return not as novelties, but as reminders that your body is not something to be managed, but something to be trusted. That your mind is not something to escape, but something to befriend. That health is not a goal, but a way of moving through the world. This shift does not happen overnight, but it does happen. And the path to it is marked by thousands of small, quiet victories. One less craving, one more breath, one honest conversation, one choice to say, not today. And then, again, and again, until the choice is no longer a struggle, but a certainty. In the end, nicotine loses its power, not because you forget it, but because you remember who you were without it. And that memory, restored and real, becomes the foundation of a new chapter. A chapter defined not by restraint, but by return, to clarity, to calm, to yourself. For all the chemical impact nicotine delivers, perhaps the most underestimated aspect of its power is psychological. What it alters is not just the brain's chemistry, but the brain's logic, the reasoning we use to justify its place in our lives. That logic doesn't always present itself as clear thought. More often, it hides in subtle beliefs, quiet assumptions that shape behavior. The belief that nicotine helps manage stress, the idea that it enhances performance, the assumption that quitting will make everything harder. These beliefs don't come from data. They come from repetition, from experience, from moments when nicotine did seem to help, even if only for a moment. And when those moments stack up over time, they build a kind of personal mythology, a story about nicotine's value. Breaking that story is one of the most difficult parts of quitting. What's important to understand is that the story is not entirely false. There is truth in the fact that nicotine changes how we feel. It does activate dopamine. It does temporarily reduce the sensation of stress. It does sharpen attention. But the key word in all of those truths is temporary. What nicotine gives in moments, it often steals in the long run. The stress relief it offers is followed by a new stress, the craving for the next dose. The clarity it sparks fades when the receptors grow numb. The emotional comfort it provides is followed by a longer emotional flatness. It's not that nicotine does nothing. It's that what it does comes with a cost that accumulates slowly and is often paid in silence. Stress is a good example. Many people report smoking or vaping to manage anxiety or tension. And in the short term, that seems to make sense. Nicotine engages the brain's reward system, blunts reactivity, and creates a moment of pause. But over time, nicotine increases baseline levels of anxiety. The receptors become more active, the system more volatile, the mood more sensitive. You begin to feel more anxious, when nicotine isn't present, which makes the return to nicotine feel like a solution. But it's a solution to a problem it helped create. This cycle can last for years, decades even, without being questioned. It becomes part of the emotional architecture, a familiar escape that begins to feel essential. This pattern is not limited to stress. It extends to boredom, social discomfort, loneliness, even celebration. Nicotine finds its way into every emotional landscape. It becomes the punctuation at the end of conversations, the bridge between awkward silences, the background to long drives or short walks. And once it's there, it's hard to imagine life without it. Not because it provides so much, but because its absence is so unfamiliar. That unfamiliarity can feel like loss, like disorientation. But it's not the absence of a need. It's the exposure of a pattern, understanding that distinction matters. Because when someone tries to quit nicotine, they're not only breaking a chemical habit, they're unraveling years of behavioral programming. They're untangling associations that have been reinforced by thousands of choices. And while the chemical withdrawal fades over days and weeks, the behavioral echo lasts longer. A place, a person, a time of day. All of these can reignite the desire. Not because the body needs nicotine, but because the brain remembers when it used to arrive. This is where many people relapse, not because they are weak, but because the association is strong. The moment arrives. The trigger is present, and without a replacement, without a new story, the old one takes over. That's why successful recovery is never just about stopping. It's about substituting, replacing old rituals with new ones, creating different anchors for stress, for boredom, for celebration. These new anchors can be anything: exercise, breathwork, art, music, conversation. What matters is not the activity itself, but the meaning behind it. The feeling that says, "This is how I care for myself now." That act of substitution is not just a coping strategy. It's an act of neuroplasticity. Every time a craving is met with a new behavior, the brain forms a different connection. And over time, those new pathways grow stronger than the old ones. What once was automatic becomes avoidable. What once felt necessary becomes irrelevant. This is not magic, it's biology. The same biology that allowed addiction to form is the biology that allows recovery to happen. Still, there are moments when the craving returns, sometimes unexpectedly. It might happen a year after quitting, or 5 or 10. A stressful day, a painful memory, a sudden loss. The old voice resurfaces. Just one. Just this once. Just to get through this moment. And in those moments, it can feel as if nothing has changed, as if all the progress has vanished. But that feeling is not the truth. It is a reflex, a mental echo of the past. And just like an echo, it fades if you don't respond to it. If you watch it without acting on it, it begins to lose its shape. The truth is, addiction recovery is not a straight line. It's a series of circles, returning to the same places, the same thoughts, but responding differently. And each different response changes you. It teaches your brain that the old behavior is no longer required, that safety is possible without it, that comfort can come from within. Over time, these small changes create a different life. A life no longer shaped by avoidance, but by engagement. This engagement shows up in subtle ways, in how you respond to stress, in how you move through silence, in the confidence that comes from knowing you are no longer managed by a substance. That confidence grows not from perfection, but from persistence, from learning to stay present when it's easier to escape, from noticing the urge without following it, from building a life that feels good without needing to be numbed. There is a freedom in this that is difficult to describe, a freedom that doesn't always feel like fireworks or epiphanies. Sometimes it feels like stillness, like waking up and realizing you didn't think about nicotine at all yesterday, like handling a hard conversation without needing a break to breathe in chemicals, like remembering who you are, not who you were while managing the addiction. And yet, the world around you may still encourage nicotine use. Advertising, social circles, stressful environments. These reminders can create friction, especially early in recovery, but they also create clarity. Each reminder becomes a test of alignment. Are you living according to your new story or reacting to the old one? That question doesn't need to be answered perfectly. It needs to be answered honestly. And with time, the honest answer becomes more and more empowering. There's another piece that often gets overlooked: the physiological recovery of the body long after nicotine is gone. The cells, once stressed by constant exposure, begin to repair. DNA that was once under oxidative stress starts to stabilize. The risk for cardiovascular disease, lung disease, and certain cancers begins to fall. In some cases, it drops dramatically within the first 2 years. In others, it takes longer. But the trajectory is always the same: repair. The lungs, which once strained under the load of toxins and inflammation, begin to clear. The liver, which processed nicotine and its byproducts, begins to function more efficiently. The endocrine system, disrupted by constant stimulation, starts to find balance. Hormones stabilize, appetite normalizes, reproductive health improves, sleep becomes deeper and more restorative. These are not small changes, they are foundational. They restore the body's ability to thrive, not just survive. Over time, the improvements become visible. The skin clears, the voice steadies, the breath deepens, the eyes brighten. These changes are not cosmetic. They are signs of internal systems working in sync. Systems that had been disrupted by years of chemical interference, now operating on their own terms. Emotionally, the shifts can be even more profound. Mood swings stabilize, anxiety reduces, focus returns. There is a steadying of the nervous system that feels like returning to center. Not because life has gotten easier, but because the brain is no longer being pulled out of rhythm every few hours. There is a settling, a quiet strength that emerges not from external validation, but from internal coherence. That coherence is what makes long-term recovery sustainable. When the nervous system is calm, the body aligned, and the mind no longer clouded by chemicals, decisions become easier, relationships improve, productivity increases, creativity returns. These gains are often surprising, not because they weren't possible before, but because they had been muted by dependence. With nicotine gone, space opens up for possibility, for growth, for connection. It's also important to acknowledge that some people carry shame about their history with nicotine. They view the years of use as weakness, as failure. But the truth is more complex. Nicotine is one of the most addictive substances on Earth. It was engineered to be irresistible. Its availability was normalized by culture, its power underestimated by science. Using nicotine does not make someone weak, it makes them human. Recovering from it makes them strong. That strength is quiet. It doesn't need to announce itself. It shows up in small choices, in daily discipline, in the way someone rebuilds their life after dependence. These acts of rebuilding may not be visible to others, but they are monumental. Each craving resisted is a declaration. Each day without relapse is a statement of self-respect. Each moment of clarity is a reclaiming of one's mind. This isn't about perfection, it's about direction. Every day without nicotine is a step away from self-sabotage and a step towards self-stewardship. Some days will be hard. The urge may return. The doubt may whisper. But those are not signs of failure. They are signs of healing, of the nervous system learning a new way, of the mind choosing clarity over comfort. And the more this choice is made, the easier it becomes. Eventually, the cravings quiet. The triggers lose their power. The story changes. You are no longer someone struggling to quit. You are someone who lives without needing to. That identity shift is the final stage of recovery. And it doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives in moments of ease, in the confidence that you can handle stress without reaching for something external, in the realization that you are whole without it. This is not about returning to who you were before nicotine. It's about becoming someone new. Someone who has learned how to face discomfort without avoidance. Someone who knows what their body feels like without interference. Someone who has reclaimed their time, their energy, their peace. That version of you is not just possible. It's already forming. When you finally step into life without nicotine, not just surviving it, but living fully within it, it doesn't always feel like triumph. At least not in the loud, cinematic sense. What it feels like is space. Not the emptiness of loss, but the room to move, to breathe, to be without managing something quietly dragging behind you. It feels like mornings that begin without the countdown to your first hit. Like evenings that end without the ritual of justification. It feels like walking into your day without needing to adjust your chemistry just to feel level. But arriving here isn't about a single decision. It's not one promise made or one milestone crossed. It's dozens, hundreds, thousands. Quiet refusals, private victories, uncelebrated moments of strength. It's the ordinary made extraordinary by the fact that you're doing it clear-headed, present, and free from a substance that once shaped your every rhythm. And the beauty of this state is that no one has to see it for it to be real. Your body knows. Your mind knows. The stability you feel is evidence enough. Nicotine's grip was always built on rhythm, on frequency, routine, repetition. That was how it embedded itself. That's also how you pulled yourself out. Not in dramatic acts of willpower, but in the small, repeated movements of reclaiming your own timing. Relearning your triggers, rewiring your reflexes, giving yourself permission to be uncomfortable without immediately anesthetizing it. And maybe most powerfully, accepting that discomfort isn't always a signal that something's wrong. Sometimes it's a signal that something important is unfolding, that you're healing. The relationship we have with any addictive substance is rarely just about the substance. It's about what it promised us, about what it seemed to solve. And for many, nicotine promised relief from the weight of life. Stress, loneliness, indecision, fear. It promised control, but it was always a short-term contract, paid in full with long-term cost. Because nicotine doesn't take away emotion, it postpones it. It doesn't solve stress, it shuffles it to the side. And when the chemical fades, the stress remains, now framed by the need for another fix. So when you quit nicotine, what you're really doing is facing the truth that the feelings you once escaped still need tending. And this time, you're showing up for them without a mask, without a filter, without a chemical shortcut. That work is not easy, but it is transformative, because in doing it, you find out what you're actually made of. Not just your strength, but your capacity for patience, your resilience in discomfort, your creativity in meeting need without numbing. And these are not just survival traits. They are growth traits. They're what allow you to stop merely enduring and start expanding into a life that fits you better. There is also something subtle but profound that happens in your relationships. When nicotine is no longer present, you show up differently. You're more available, more grounded. Your time isn't constantly pulled toward managing a habit. Your attention isn't split between the moment and the next dose. You start to listen more, respond more thoughtfully, laugh more deeply. You're no longer borrowing presence from your future in exchange for fleeting calm. And others may not notice the mechanics of that shift, but they feel its effects. Your kids feel it, your partner, your colleagues, your friends. You feel it, even when you can't explain it. It's not about being perfect, it's about being here. The return to presence is subtle at first. You might not even know it's happening. You just start noticing things more. Details, textures, sounds, emotions. You become more attuned to your body, the tension in your shoulders, the hunger that actually feels like hunger, the sleepiness that doesn't need to be pushed away. You start making choices based on how you feel, not on what your cravings tell you. That internal compass, long dulled, begins to work again. And it doesn't point toward avoidance. It points toward alignment. It's here, in this new alignment, that the question shifts. No longer, how do I quit nicotine? But instead, what does life look like without it? The answer to that question isn't static. It unfolds over time. For some, it means rediscovering energy that used to be dulled. For others, it means rebuilding confidence. Not the kind built on control, but the kind rooted in self-trust. For many, it simply means peace. A quiet that no longer needs to be interrupted by the spark of a chemical to feel like home. Of course, life without nicotine still includes stress, boredom, and difficulty. No chemical takes that away, not permanently. But now, those moments are met with different tools. You breathe through the tension. You talk through the discomfort. You sit with the emptiness long enough to see what's beneath it. And you realize it's not a void. It's space. The kind of space where something new can grow. A hobby, a thought, a truth about yourself that had been waiting patiently beneath the smoke or vapor or patch. That's where possibility lives. Not in the absence of challenge, but in the presence of capacity. And every time you move through a hard moment without reaching back for nicotine, that capacity expands. You begin to see yourself not as someone at war with a substance, but as someone building a life that no longer includes it. That perspective is powerful because it shifts your identity. You are no longer a person trying to resist. You are a person who has already chosen, who wakes each day not with a question of, can I stay quit? But with a knowing that you already are. Over time, you will forget what the cravings felt like. You will forget what it was like to count hours between hits. You will forget what it felt like to worry whether you had enough supply. What remains is the time you reclaimed, the clarity, the steadiness, the knowledge that your nervous system is no longer someone else's to manipulate, that your decisions now rise from you, not from a need to feed a chemical, but from the solid ground of your own values. And even if the world never congratulates you for this, even if no one else sees the victory, It lives in your body, in your lungs, now taking in air fully, in your heart, beating without nicotine's pressure, in your skin, healing and glowing, in your mind, unclouded and calm. You carry your freedom not as a flag, but as a pulse, quiet, steady, yours. There may still be memories of the old you, the one who used. They may return in dreams or flashbacks or stray thoughts. But they are no longer the present tense. They are no longer the author of your day. They are just pages you've turned. And every day you stay nicotine-free, you write something new. Not a manifesto, not a rule book. Just a simple truth. You are capable of living well without needing to modify your brain to do it. That's the power of neuroplasticity. Not just the ability to change, but to choose again. To respond to life with curiosity instead of compulsion. To notice pain without avoiding it. To celebrate without needing a chemical enhancer. The longer you live in this way, the more natural it becomes. Until eventually, it's no longer effort. It's just who you are. And yes, the world is still filled with stress, with noise, with reasons to numb out. But now you meet those moments with something stronger than stimulation. You meet them with your full self, with the clarity of knowing what matters to you, with the integrity of no longer outsourcing your resilience to a molecule. That doesn't make life easy, but it makes it real. And real is what nicotine was always trying to hide. So now, when you see someone else begin their journey, when you see the flicker of recognition in their eyes, the first stirrings of wanting to break free, you'll know what to say. You'll know that the road is long, but not lonely. That the struggle is real, but so is the reward. That the discomfort fades, but the self you discover lasts. And you'll know that the most important thing they need is not a promise to be perfect, but the courage to begin. Just begin. Just once. And then again. Until it becomes a pattern. Until the pattern becomes a rhythm. And the rhythm becomes a life. Because the truth about nicotine is that it never gave you anything you didn't already have. It only distracted you from what was already inside you: resilience, calm, courage, clarity. Now, with nothing between you and your own biology, you begin to feel those things more often. They aren't chemical. They aren't temporary. They're real. And that reality, grounded in your own choice, your own brain, your own strength, that is what freedom feels like. It doesn't come in a bottle or a patch or a plume of smoke. It comes in breath, in presence, in the steady return to yourself, one moment at a time. You were never missing anything. You were never broken. You were only interrupted. Now, the noise is gone. Now, you are whole.